The Tenzing-Hillary Airport, or the Lukla Airport for short, is a small airport located in the village of Lukla, Nepal. The airport is situated at an altitude of 9,830 feet above sea level and serves as the starting point for mountaineers and trekkers beginning their journeys to Mount Everest Base Camp. Also notably, the airport serves the crucial role of importing supplies to Lukla and the surrounding villages, as the villages are otherwise unreachable due to the lack of roads in the region. Due to its less than ideal location, the single runway at the airport is very short, only 1,729 feet long, and is steeply sloped at a grade of 11.7%. Furthermore, the precarious runway is just one of the hazards that pilots must overcome when servicing the airport, as the location of the airport itself also poses even more dangers as well. Located within a bowl of mountains, the approach to the Lukla airport is often threaded by strong afternoon crosswinds that make approaches impossible, and so, most flights are scheduled for the mornings, and these strong winds are one of the primary causes of the cancellation of approximately 50% of all scheduled flights at the airport. The bowl of mountains also poses another threat to pilots, as approaches to the airport must be executed correctly on the first try, as the rising mountainous surrounding terrain and the strong unpredictable winds make go-arounds a no-go, and the airport actually lacks any procedure for go-arounds at all. Furthermore, the Lukla airport is lacking in modern landing instruments, meaning that approaches to the airport's runway are strictly visual. Further adding to the numerous hazards of the airport, the runway is also often enveloped by a thick, foggy cloud cover that makes approaching the airport a near impossibility, and after the deadly crash of Yeti Airlines Flight 103 in 2008, a topic which I made a video about if you'd like to learn more about it, the airport began to strictly close the runway when the conditions became foggy. It is all of these factors combined that have also earned the Lukla airport the reputation as the most dangerous airport in the world, and because of this, the Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal requires that all pilots servicing the airport have over 100 short takeoff and landing plane flights, over a year's experience flying short takeoff and landing planes, and over 10 flights with an instructor pilot, specifically for learning how to land and take off at the Lukla airport. Thus, the aircraft pilots that service the airport are highly and specifically trained to navigate the numerous hazards posed by the airport's harsh environment, and during the times that the airport is open, it is constantly buzzing with activity, as despite its small size, the Lukla airport sees over 100,000 people pass through it yearly. On the morning of April 14th, 2019, the Lukla airport was open and bustling as usual. Just after 9 a.m. local time, at 9:03 a.m., a Let L-410 registered 9N AMH, owned by Summit Air, started its engines for its departure. The plane had landed at 9 a.m. and had quickly completed its delivery of passengers and cargo, and was making a return flight back to the Ramachhop airport with 3 people on board. The captain, a man named R.B. Rokaya, a highly experienced pilot with over 15,000 flight hours. The first officer and co-pilot, a man named Sujit Dungana, with 865 flight hours, along with one cabin attendant named R. Lama. The flight was scheduled for a 9:08 a.m. takeoff time, and at 9:07 a.m., the L-410 left the staging area and taxied onto the runway, positioning itself for takeoff. After lining up the plane on the runway, Captain Rokaya handed over control to First Officer Dungana. 50 seconds after positioning itself on the runway, the L-410 began its takeoff. However, as it began to pick up speed, the plane veered to the right, barreling towards the airport's helipads, which at the time were occupied by 2 helicopters, an AS-350B3E registered 9N ALC, owned by Manong Air, that was idling with its rotor blade still spinning on the upper helipad. and another AS-350B3E registered 9N-ALK. The veering L-410 skidded 43 feet across the personnel sidewalk and a grassy patch that divided the runway from the helipads, where it directly struck a police officer serving as airport security with its spinning rotor blade as it careened towards the upper helipad. The plane then collided with 9N-ALC, the helicopter with the idling but still spinning rotor, as it plunged to a halt on the lower helipad, with the impact shredding 9N-ALC and dragging its wreckage from the upper helipad into the lower helipad below. Help soon rushed to the frantic scene of the disaster, and the survivors of the collision were evacuated from the wreckage. 2 people had been killed in the incident: the police officer that had been struck by the plane's spinning rotor blade, a man named Ram Badahur Kadaka, and the co-pilot, Sujit Dungana, who was struck by flying debris from the rotor blade. Another police officer that had been part of the airport's perimeter security detail, a man named Rudra Badahur Shrestha, that had also been caught in the collision, was rushed to a hospital in Kathmandu in critical condition, where unfortunately he died while undergoing treatment for his wounds. 3 other men were also rushed to the hospital with serious injuries, including the pilot of 9N-ALC, but fortunately were able to make a recovery from their injuries. In the aftermath of the disaster, an investigation was conducted by the Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal to find the cause of the collision. The investigation team canvassed the wreckage from the site for information that would lead them closer to finding the root cause of the incident. Due to the plane veering to its right, the team immediately suspected that the disaster was caused by imbalanced thrusters, and after inspecting the plane for any signs of potential mechanical failure, they were able to find none. However, after inspecting the L-410 system logs from the onboard flight data recorder, the team's suspicions were confirmed, as the data showed that the right thruster had been abruptly shifted to full power by the co-pilot. The investigation team then attempted to pull the audio recordings from the cockpit voice recorder in an attempt to better understand what was being said in the cockpit at the time of the crash, but after multiple attempts at recovering the audio logs, they were ultimately unable to, and found that the cockpit voice recorder had likely been installed incorrectly in the plane, and this error had not been caught by aircraft inspectors, something far too common in Nepal's aviation industry, and a topic I touched on more in detail in my video about Yeti Airlines Flight 103. Toxicology reports for both pilots of the L-410 yielded negative results for any inhibiting substances. However, the report noted that perhaps the pilots had been otherwise distracted. The L-410 was scheduled for takeoff during the prime time of a rare sunny day at Lukla, just before the heavy crosswinds typically begin to pick up at around 10 a.m., and the schedule for the rest of the weather window was tight, and both men likely felt pressured to make a hasty departure. Furthermore, the report noted that Captain Rokaya's decision to hand over control of the plane for takeoff to First Officer Dungana was to give the relatively inexperienced First Officer more takeoff experience at Lukla. They noted that this decision was likely made because the flight was a return flight with no passengers or cargo aside from the flight crew, and took place on the Nepalese New Year, and thus the captain may have been lulled into a false sense of security about the first officer's capabilities. The final findings of the investigation into the disaster found that, quote, failure of the first officer to immediately assess and act upon the abrupt shifting of the right power lever resulted in the aircraft veering to the right, causing certain time lapse for the captain to take control in order to initiate correction. The captain's attempted corrections of adding power could not correct the veering. Subsequently, application of brakes resulted in asymmetric braking due to the position of the pedals, and further contributed veering towards the right. Thank you all for watching.